Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello students, welcome to the 10th lecture on the lecture series of women's writing, and in this lecture we are going to deal with confessions. The topic is confessions, and as you can see there is a subtopic along with that, a way of dealing with life. So before we move on to the first slide, let us discuss a little about confessions. Who are we to confess? To whom do we confess? Why do we confess? These are all matters of questions related to the mental state. We confess because something lies very heavy in our mind. We confess because we think that our mind is engrossed with a particular idea, and that idea is dragging us down. That idea is not letting us have a good night's sleep. That idea, to some people, is driving them crazy. So what happens in these cases, a confession helps us to vent ourselves, to give expression to those thoughts which have not been expressed before. Sometimes we need to write down things. This is a very common exercise that we have done, I am sure all of us have done as children, that when we have a lot of things on the list, we write it down. Suppose you see one of your parents, they are going to shop for certain things. So instead of thinking, okay, this item, this much quantity, this item, this much quantity, they make a list. So they write it down, and it is sort of an action of writing those things down which gives them a sense of order, and of course it unburdens their mind. Similarly, if we have many thoughts one after the other in our mind, and we are dealing them every time, balancing them every time, our mind gets tired. In order to overcome that tiredness, we sometimes need to narrate those thoughts, and confessions are a perfect way of doing so. Let me also tell you that confessions were a part of the Catholic practice that is related to Christianity. When you go to a church, there is a particular setup, a wooden box with a net inside it, and that is called a confession box. In that confession box, a person, a Catholic person, a religious person walks into and confesses his or her sins and unburdens the guilty mind. The mind which is ridden with guilt has some dark secrets in it and cannot live with it, cannot tell it to a person. In that confession box, that person is getting a free kind of field where that person is able to lay down his or her thoughts and come back. And the policy of that confession box was that whoever is on the other side, especially a clergyman, maybe a father, or maybe any person associated with the church authorities, who listens to those confessions and later on says that, okay, you have not done a very good job, but I pray for your soul that your soul may not suffer in hell, and these are the prayers that I am saying, and then the person prays and then says that you can go. Now you are purged of your sins, and now you can go a happy man or a woman. So this was the exercise the church used to do at that point of time, and these confessions became a practice. So instead of the box, now this confession started to appear in public, in the public domain. But if a person just sits there and talks about himself or herself, nobody will be interested for a longer period of time. But if that person writes it down and adds a bit of humor to it, or adds, more importantly, realism to it, then writes and then publishes that work becomes a symbol of the self of that person. And we all know that a person, if you are just listening to a person, that thing is not much important, that thing does not generate an interest. But if you are reading about a person's life, that generates some kind of interest in yourself, because those words are not actually being spoken by that person. The sound of the written words are originating in your brain. So there will be a difference when a person speaking to you and you are reading the writings of a person on a book. So there is two kind of differences. So the one, when the sound is generated inside your brain by your act of reading those writings, then you will think that the writings are your own, because you do not know the voice of the author. The only voice that is ringing inside your brain is your own voice. So once you try, or once you associate yourself with the identity of the writer, that confession becomes a part of yourself. It has a greater readership. So let us see what is confessional literature. Confessions in literature, it was a practice, and they used to talk about the hidden details revealed and most importantly recorded. I told you that women's writing, the writing part is more important. Whenever you are writing something, it becomes a permanent record. And when a person is writing a confessional kind of thing and putting it into printed words, it has consequences. It will have effect on the society. Next, let us get a view of some famous works. Confessions of Saint Augustine, it was one of the earliest confessions published in 400 AD. Confessions of an English opium eater, and this is one of the most famous confession literary works, and it was written by Thomas D. Quincy in 1822. And then we have Confessions by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which was written in between 1782 and 89. And all these confessions, of course, they have autobiographical details. Apart from that, they also have views and opinions. Apart from these autobiographical details, they have the author's views, their opinions, their likes, their dislikes, and of course, what are the things that are affecting their mental state at that moment. All of these factors play a great role in building up the body of work we called as confessional literature. Here are some poets who are very popular as confessional poets. One of them is John Berryman, Robert Lowell, Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, Emily Dickinson and Kamala Das. Out of these poets, we are going to study Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, Emily Dickinson and Kamala Das. Apart from these poets, there are also many women writers who wrote autobiographies. They are also a sort of confession. They also talk about the women's lived experiences. Right in the first lecture in this series, we talked about the purpose of studying women's writing, because women's writing written by women for women, and of course to tell the people about what kind of life a woman leads under the male dominance, under the patriarchy, and what kind of language the women must develop in order to overthrow all of these power equations and reside in a country having gender equality. The contribution of these women writers are of a great deal, are very important to study. So, before we move on to the poets, let us talk about Ras Sundari Devi. She was a Bengali woman who wrote in Bangla. Please make a note that the people who lived in West Bengal, they are Bengalis, and the language spoken in West Bengal is Bangla. It is not Bengali. So, Ras Sundari Devi, she lived during this time period. much before the independence of India, and India was of course under British rule at that time, and West Bengal was a major center of Western education, but Rajsundari Devi did not receive any kind of Western education. She is an Indian autobiographer. She started writing her life story when she was widowed at the age of 59. So her husband died, and she got some time on her hands because she is no longer tied to the society, and she is not expected to join people, because whenever at that point of time a woman's husband died, that woman used to be considered as ill luck. So she was not invited to places and she was unwelcome in many occasions. So she had a lot of time to write or start writing her autobiography. Of course, she was keen to learn reading and writing right from her very childhood, but she could never manage to write anything before the age of 59 or before she was widowed. The name of her autobiography is Amar Jibon. That can be translated into English as My Life. And she completed that autobiography at the age of 88, the ripe age of 88. And she began writing the story right from her childhood, from her earliest memories, the ones she can remember or she can barely remember. And in her book, we find her condition as a child bride, then as a mother, then as a widow, and lastly as a learner. So you see, the first three phases of her life here, she has already experienced, or rather discharged, the duties of a good woman, the angel in the house. We reiterate the concept again. She has been a good daughter, a good wife, a good mother, and finally when her husband died, she was also a good widow. But after that, she realized there is one realm she has not explored yet, and that is of the learner. The learner, especially relating to education, proper education, not the education that was given by the society to become a woman, but to become a learner, a person who wants to learn about the other things in life other than being a woman. So one of the other things, or the most important of the other thing that she wanted, was education. And you will see that everywhere in her autobiography there is the element of fear. She says that she is afraid. She is afraid that she might hurt other people. She is afraid that her mother is crying. She is afraid that if somebody has wronged her and she goes and complains, that person is going to suffer. This kind of sensitive soul was of that of Rajsundari Devi, and we can only learn from our sensitivity that what a really sympathetic and empathetic human being one can be. Her earliest memories of learning, unkindness, widowhood, perks of education. So these are all parts of Amar Jibon, or My Life. She remembers how children used to be unkind to her. She remembers how men used to be unkind to her. And she also remembers how women used to be unkind to her. And she writes all of that down. So this is not only her feelings as we generally associate. This is also what the social reality was and what she was directly experiencing. So let us have a look at some of the excerpts from Amar Jibon. My complexion used to be fair and bright, and I had a figure to match. My hands and feet were well proportioned. People used to call me a golden doll. People used to call me a golden doll. So this is a poem she used to read at school, where there was a English woman who used to teach. So the idea of women that generated, or that was invoked in the mind of the young Rajsundari, that a woman must be fair and bright, and she must have a very desirable kind of figure, and her hands and feet must be well proportioned, especially speaking of disability studies, this is blasphemous. People used to call me a golden girl. So I am a person who is desirable by all. It is not the complexion which needs to be golden, the complexion needs to be fair, and the appearance, the countenance needs to be bright. So these are some of the conditioning, the materials which condition the mindset of the women of that time, that if you do not feed these categories, if you do not subscribe to these ideas, then you are not a woman and you are somebody who is inciting, you are somebody who is revolting against the tradition, an outsider. So next we see another excerpt. He wanted to know whose daughter I was. Rajsundari Devi was visiting the same school, and there another child's parent had come visiting, and that parent has asked the teacher or the guardian of Rajsundari who was visiting at that time, that whose daughter is Rajsundari. My uncle replied, "She is the daughter of Padmalochan Rai." This remark upset me greatly. All these days I was under the impression that I was my mother's daughter. Now here I would like to tell you that Rajsundari never remembers her father. Her father died at the age of 4. Her mother raised her, and she was in company with her female relatives all the time, and she never had the concept of a father figure. So when somebody asks what is her identity, to whom does she belong, of course this is the natural answer, that she belonged to her mother. But in this case we see that a third person walks right into the conversation and intervenes with this kind of answer, that she does not belong to the mother, that she is the daughter of Padmalochan Rai, who is dead, who is gone, who is no more, but the identity still sticks to her. So from this we know that at that point of time, and of course it is prevalent in today's day also, that a woman's identity is always associated with the male members of the family. Khurima's arms and legs were badly affected by arthritis, but in spite of it she did all the household work. So these words tell us a lot about the condition, the plight of women in the Bengali society at that time. Even if the woman is ailing, even if the woman is not healthy, even if she cannot carry herself properly, it is expected of her that she and only she will do the household works and nobody else. She used to lament to me, "I wish I was dead. I just can't cope with this work anymore." So of course this is lamenting, because this is something which is very common among all the women, whoever is speaking any kind of language, that they will be expressing their wish to die because of the enormous burden of the household work. Even when they are ailing, they are sick, only they and not the male members are allowed to cook and clean and wash and nurture the children and care for the old. It is only their duty. The male members will not help, and they will strictly say that it is only the women who will do that, and if I do that I will not be able to do that, and it is not acceptable by the society either. But she must give her away. She has to be given to someone. That is why she is born a woman. At this point of time, two men are talking about Rajsundari Devi's marriage when she was 12. When she was 12, she was visiting a particular area, and 2 or 3 people were gathered in that place. When they saw Rajsundari pass that area at the age of 12 again, they started speaking amongst themselves, and Rajsundari Devi overheard it. It was not that they were whispering at her back. It was clearly that they wanted her to listen to it, because she was able to listen to that conversation very clearly, and she remembers it word by word. She says that one person says, she must give her away. This first she is the mother of Sundari Devi, and they are saying that the mother should give her daughter away because the daughter cannot live with her mother all the time. But we also know that the mother has nobody else. But the mother must give her away, and give her away. Is she a kind of an object? Is she a kind of a plaything? Is she kind of a belonging, a possession that she can keep? I can give away this pen, but I cannot give away a human being because it does not belong to me. It can be a part of me. I can belong to, again, I would like to reiterate the point that the parents belong to the children do not belong to the parent. And this is something which is reality of the life. My father and mother belongs to me, but I do not belong to my father and mother. This is the ethics of life, because I have been entitled with these kind of parents that I am having currently, and they have raised me like they can. And the mother of Sundari Devi, she knows this very well. This is the way of the world. This is how families progress. When the child grows up, the child leaves the house, gets a family of its own. But the parents, they stay where they started, and they may move away, they may build a separate house, a separate location with separate people in their lives, but they will always remain the parents of those whom they have given birth to. And similarly, this person, whoever the child is, if it is a boy, it will grow up to become a man. If it is a girl, it will grow up to become a woman, and she will have her separate family. At one point of time, she will not be known further as the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. this, or the son of Mr. and Mrs. XYZ. They will have their own identity and they will have their own children. So here when these people are talking about the mother who must give Sundari Devi away, we clearly understand that Sundari Devi was being treated like a property, like a possession, like an object. She has to be given to someone. She must belong to someone. This someone is not definitely a female, because she already has a mother. She needs to be given to someone who is male or masculine, because that is where she will derive her future identity from. That is where she will be building her own family out of. That is why she is born a woman. And this is the reason, this is the particular reason that she will belong to a male person someday. This is the reason why she took birth. That was the common idea of the people at that time. And there is also something which is very touching. That is when the mother, who has nobody else, and she raised Sundari Devi with all she can give. She gave her as much education as she could. She protected her. She did not allow her to cook and clean. Sundari Devi learned the household chores while helping Khurima, because Khurima could not work. And Sundari Devi went and worked in her household. That is how she learned how to work. And she has been raised like a pampered child according to that standards. And when she is leaving her mother's home, that scene is very shattering, heart-rending, because she cries, and at the age of 12, she is leaving her mother. She cries very much, and she sits in a palki, and the palki bearers, they just take it up, and as soon as everybody says goodbye, they walk away with the palki, and there is no turning back. And Sundari Devi did not know anybody from her in-laws. She only knew that she is going to a separate place with new people in it. And when she recollects all of these incidents, right at a ripe age of 59, she is still filled with melancholia and regret for having left her mother in her house. This is another author which we are going to study, Kamala Das. and she is quite modern in certain ways. She is an Indian poet, and the pseudonym she wrote under was Madhavi Kutty. In a previous lecture we talked about pseudonyms, so you can go back and have a look at it. It is lecture number 4. And Madhavi Kutty, that was the original pseudonym she started writing with, because she wrote confessional verse where she talks about her female sexuality, very freely, which was a taboo in that time. Her married name is Kamala Das, and at the deathbed, when she was dying, she converted herself to Islam and she took the name of Kamala Suraya. The themes of her poems are female sexuality, failure of the institution of marriage because her marriage suffered very much, her own relationships with other men, and because she did not have a caring husband, a husband with whom she went in search of love, and she was in relationship with other men. And all of that she writes very truly and sincerely in her autobiography, My Story. So we are going to read a poem by Kamala Das, My Grandmother's House. Again, I am telling you, these are the examples of confessional poetry, and they tend to be nostalgic at times. So this poem is very nostalgic, and it also carries with it the burden that is on the poet's mind. There is a house now far away where once I received love. So this is a part of history that has gone away, like the house. That woman died, the house withdrew into silence. Snakes moved among books, I was then too young to read, and my blood turned cold like the moon. How often I think of going there to peer through blind eyes of windows, or just listen to the frozen air, or in the wild despair pick an armful of darkness to bring it here to lie behind my bedroom door like a brooding dog. You cannot believe, darling, can you, that I lived in such a house and was proud and loved. I who have lost my way and beg now at strangers' doors to receive love, at least in small change. So here we are going to read on a very superficial level. So here we are going to discuss this poem very briefly. First, let us point out the words that strike us, that sound very important. The house withdrew into silence. A house cannot withdraw into silence. So something which is associated with the house, that is the childlikeness of the author, the love that the author experienced as she was a child, all of that was gone. Let's see. And my blood turned cold like the moon. So when the grandmother died, the childlikeness of the author was gone, and the warm feeling that Kamala had, that also vanished. Now here Kamala says that she wants to go back to her grandmother's house and bring a handful of darkness, an armful of darkness, which she can keep behind her bedroom door like a dog waiting. So the imagery of the dog over here gives us a kind of hope, because dog it can be a watchdog, and dog is, we know, is a very faithful companion. Even if everybody deserts you, the dog will still be with you. That is why it is so famous worldwide. So she wants that kind of love, and she wants, even if the house is not there, the love is not there, the shadow of the house is there, the feeling of the house is there, and she wants to go back to that past and bring that handful of darkness, that feeling that it was, the representation of the feeling, the memories which are now gone, she wants to bring them back and keep it outside her bedroom door, her own comfort zone, just to make sure that nobody who can hurt her can come inside. It will guard her vulnerable self against the world which is wronging womanhood. I who have lost my way and beg now at strangers' doors to receive love. So I am the person who is vulnerable over here, because I was used to a certain way of the world. I was used to a life where everything was filled with love. But at this current situation, I don't have anything. I am penniless, and I am going to people from here and there, and I am calling out everybody just to ask, can you give me a little bit of love? The one that my grandmother used to give me, not the one which you think love is. This is a despair, and she has already used the word despair. Despair in humanity, that there is no love, there is no genuine sense of love anymore. Moving on to our next poet, American poet, Emily Dickinson. She was writing much in the 1850s, and she has written almost 1800 poems, but Emily Dickinson was an introvert. She did not talk to people, she lived within a house, she did not go out, she did not meet anybody. Only she wrote some letters here and there and talked to her sister-in-law, initially her friend, then Susan, her sister-in-law, married her brother and they remained friends for long. And with only this company, she stayed forever, and most of her poems were posthumously published, that is after her death in 1955. What are the features of her poems? Most of her poems did not have titles. There were unconventional punctuation marks. Here and there you will find a dash, you will find an exclamation, you will find comma. Here and there are very less standard English grammatical sense to those expressions. Themes: death, immortality, aesthetics, society, nature, spirituality, and most importantly, poetry on poetry. So, she not only wrote about all these topics that you see, she also wrote about writing poetry, which is very interesting. That is what we called a metapoetic expression. Meta means beyond. So, when she is writing beyond her poetical realm and she is detaching herself as a writer and looking at her writing from a third person perspective, that is called a metapoetic reality, that the self is studying the self which is writing the poetry. So, this was later termed by modern poetry as a metapoetic attribute, and most of her poems were dedicated to Susan Huntington Gilbert Dickinson because she married Emily's brother, and that is why the last part of Dickinson, most of the poems she dedicated to Susan. This is one of the poems. Like I said, you will see a lot of dashes which can mean anything and everything. I'm wife by Emily Dickinson. I'm wife. I've finished that. That other state, I'm czar, I'm woman now. It's safer so. How odd the girl's life looks behind this soft eclipse. I think that earth feels so to folks in heaven. Now, this being comfort, then that other thing was pain. But why compare? I'm wife, stop there. So, this is a part of Emily Dickinson which is confessing that she regrets not having a companion in her life. This poem is a kind of rumination, is a meditation, what would have happened if she were a wife. I'm wife and I've finished that. So, she says that I am wife, now my identity is that of a wife and it's done. I have gotten over the whole process of marriage and its institutions. That other state, I am czar. So, czar is similar to the monarchy in Britain, but czar is in Russia. So, I am the monarch now, I am the controller of my own destiny. I am woman now. So, this woman is the general concept of women, that a woman must have a husband. It's safer so. Why is it safer? Because that way the society is not going to criticize you, that you do not have a husband, you do not have any additional, you do not have any male relatives or male connections. How odd the girl's life looks behind this soft eclipse. So, this soft eclipse is here the institution of marriage, and because I have already crossed that, now I can turn back and look at how the girls are looking, the unmarried girls. They look, I think that earth feels so to folks in heaven. So, those gods and goddesses were sitting in the heaven, and Emily Dickinson was a Christian. So she only believed in God. So the God, the Almighty who is sitting in heaven, but then again she uses the word folks because she's not taking God very seriously here. She's saying that that is how the earth might be looking, and because the gods take pity on human beings, so she, being a complete woman, now takes pity on those incomplete women. That is, those women who are spinsters, who are not married and who are yet to be married. This being comfort, then that other kind was pain. But why compare? I'm wife, stop there. So the other kind that she's talking about, this being comfort is the wife condition, and the other kind is the spinster condition, and this is the kind Emily Dickinson actually lived the life of, and that was pain. And I shouldn't compare these two things, she says, and finally says, stop there, because I am not going to compare, I am not going to look down upon them, upon those women who are still not married. So I am going to enjoy myself as a woman, as a complete woman, and I will pity only the younger women who are not married. So in this entire confessional stream, we see that there is a kind of sadness, a kind of melancholia, which Emily Dickinson is experiencing for not having a husband or a spouse, or rather a companion. Here, another thing that you might be very interested to look at is the use of the dashes that I have mentioned before. Here you can see that she has used 2 dashes before now and 1 dash before then. To folks in heaven, now, this being comfort. So what are the dashes for? Now when I am writing the poem, these dashes generally hint at the metapoetic element in her works, because she is writing the story. Of course, she is talking about many things, many opinions, but suddenly she takes a step back and says that now, right at this moment, right at the moment when I am writing the word heaven, I feel comfortable that I am a part of that heaven right now, because I have written that word over there, and I feel that comfort of being in heaven. And then that other kind, this dash again brings her back into the original flow of the poem, which was the theme of looking down of the woman. So this particular instant can be said that this is the metapoetic break in this poem. We move on to study another poet, Sylvia Plath. She was writing in the 1950s, and here you can see American poet, novelist, short story writer, and she wrote an autobiographical or a semi-autobiographical novel called The Bell Jar in 1963. In 1982, she won the Pulitzer Prize. She was married to Ted Hughes, and Ted Hughes was the winner of the Nobel Prize in 1956. In one of the articles, Sylvia Plath says that she admired Ted Hughes so much so that whenever Ted Hughes recited his poetry, she thought that she was hearing the voice of God. But their marriage suffered many ups and downs. Instead of having kids together, Sylvia suffered from clinical depression right from her early childhood, and on multiple instances she wanted to take her own life. The collection of the book of poems, which became very popular in 1965, written by Sylvia Plath, is Ariel. So the next poem that we will be talking about is Lady Lazarus, written by Sylvia Plath. Now this is quite a big poem, so I will go one by one and I will not read the poem at once, but I will draw your attention to the important points that are there to be discussed, which can be related to how she is trying to deal with her depression and her suicidal tendencies. I have done it again. It represents to the suicide attempt that she has done. 1 year in every 10, I manage it, a sort of walking miracle, my skin, bright as a Nazi lampshade, my right foot a paperweight, that is, I'm dragging myself, I don't want to live this life. My feet are heavy, they are like paperweight. My face a featureless, fine jewel linen. Peel of the napkin, oh my enemy, do I terrify? So she has made 3 suicide attempts in 30 years, because she is 30 when she is writing the poem. The nose, the eyes, pits, the full set of teeth. So everything that I have on me, the sour breath will vanish in a day. So as soon as I commit suicide, everything is going to switch off. Soon, soon the flesh, the grave cave, it will be at home on me, and I a smiling woman. So all of these things, right now I am a smiling woman, but as soon as I kill myself, everything will be eaten by the grave. I am only 30 and I like the cat I have, and like the cat I have 9 times to die. It is said that it is a mythology, of course, that cats live 9 lives. So this is the 3rd time and she has more 6 attempts to make. This is number 3. What a trash, because she was not able to complete her process of killing herself. To annihilate each decade, what a million filaments the peanut crunching crowd shoves in to see. So all the people who gather and try to have a look at her and try to have a piece of the life she has, she does not want any part in all those facade. Them unwrap me hand and foot, the big striptease. So everybody tries to come and unwrap myself. So this word unwrap me, it appears that she is like a gift for everybody. We wrap a gift and then we unwrap it. But she says that she does not want that. She is not a gift to be given to everybody. She has her own life. She wants that life for herself. But here everybody comes and strip teases her. Gentlemen, ladies, these are my hands, my knees. I may be skin and bone. Nevertheless, I am the same, identical woman. The first time it happened, I was 10. So this thing, I may be skin and bone, shows the physical state of Sylvia at that time, because she has undergone clinical depression and she has lost a lot of weight and she was on the verge of a mental breakdown. The first time it happened, I was 10. So she tried to take her life when she was 10. It was an accident. This was not an intentional one. The second time I meant it. So the second time I really wanted to kill myself, to last it out and not come back at all. I rocked shut, but that was a failure also, and I did not venture in that area. I rocked shut as a seashell. So when a seashell, you will see, when it is disturbed, it snaps, it shuts very quickly. So similarly, when Sylvia was not able to kill herself, the only thing she could do was withdraw herself from the world and keep her own peace within herself, not to deal with the world's madness. They had to call and pick up the worms of me like sticky pearls. So when she shut herself within her own mind and she would not give her mind to anybody else, the only thing the others could do was call from outside the shell, outside the mental door, outside the wall she has built with the outside world. The only thing they could do was call, but she wouldn't like to answer. Dying is an art, like everything else. I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I have a call. Somebody is good at something, we say that this person has a call from the God, that you need to become an artist, you need to become a singer, you need to become a dancer. That is what we call talented person. It's a something which is innate, which is natural. So she compares the act of dying with talent. It's easy enough to do it in a cell. Now this cell is the cell of the locked room she has in her mind. It can be the shell of the locked asylum or the mental facility where she was hospitalized for some time. It's easy enough to do it and stay put. It's the theatrical comeback in broad day. So it is like if you kill yourself and you stay put, there is nothing so important that is going to change. It is theatrical to come back in broad day. So, if you are killing yourself inside a locked room, that is a different kind of a peaceful death she is talking about. But it will be very melodramatic, very theatrical if you come back on a broad day like that of Jesus Christ. This is where she is referring to the resurrection. To the same place, the same face, the same brute, amused shout, a miracle that knocks me out. There is a charge for the eyeing of my scars, there is a charge for the hearing of my heart, it really goes. So whenever I encounter the world again, the same people, the same face, the same men, the same relations, the same social equations, it fills my mind with so much disappointment that it takes a toll on my mental health, and that is the price that I am paying for living. And there is a charge, a very large charge for a word or a touch or a bit of blood. Once a piece of my hair or my clothes, or a piece of my hair or my clothes. So, here doctor. This doctor is the person, she writes the word in such a way as if it sounds like a Greek mythological demon, doctor, because the doctors were the ones who rushed to help her when she took her suicidal attempts, and that is why she does not like the doctors, and she says, she calls them as doctor and also puts them at place of her enemy. I am your opus, I am your valuable, the pure gold baby that melts to a shriek. I turn and burn. Do not think I underestimate your great concern. I do not underestimate your great concern, but because of you, I am turning and burning in this world. You are the ones who is keeping me alive, who is making me forcibly to remain alive for others to take, for others to gain from my existence. What about me? I don't want to stay alive. I don't want this life anymore. What about my wishes? Ash, ash, you poke and stir, flesh, bone, there is nothing there. So, after a body is burnt, the people who come and look for ornaments, the rich people, when they burn the bodies, this is not a Christian practice, and she is referring to the other religious practices where the bodies are burned with all the ornaments on, and the poor, the lower sections of the society, they come to that place after the body is burnt and they poke at the ashes to look if there are some gold ornaments lying there. Similarly, her life has become that ash because she is burning. She has already burnt a lot, and people are coming and poking at that ash to find some gold ornaments if they can gain from her death or from her life in death and death in life situation. A cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling. Whatever anybody can get, they are grabbing at it. Here God, here Lucifer, beware, beware. So, if you are playing God in my life, you must also beware of Lucifer, because you can be the God and just a turn of the opinion and perspective, you can be Lucifer. Out of the ash I rise with my red hair and I eat men like air. Because you are the one who are raising me, you are trying to play God in my life, that particular doctor, you are raising a devil, because once I come back to life, I will be more dangerous than I was before. So, this kind of confession in the poetry about her own despair, disappointment with life, and on the people around her who are trying to keep alive her relationships with them, is some sort of disorienting for the readers. They cannot simply identify with it unless and until they read her poems very deeply, understand the subtext of clinical depression. Finally, Sylvia Plath committed suicide at a later stage in her life. This is another poet. She is also American, and she was also suffering from depression and suicidal tendencies, and she was also committed to some mental health facilities where she underwent therapy. Her name is Anne Sexton, Anne Gray Harvey Sexton. She also, like Sylvia Plath, won the 1967 Pulitzer Prize for her book Live or Die. She was a good friend of Sylvia Plath. The themes that her poems covered is sexual infidelity, childhood, neglect, mental disorder and divorce. And similar to that of Plath, who was suffering from a mental breakdown due to her due to her separation with Ted Hughes, Anne Sexton was also suffering something very similar, and this condition worsened with time. This is a poem by Anne Sexton, and we are going to give a quick reading. Not that it was beautiful, but that in the end there was a certain sense of order there, something worth learning in that narrow diary of my mind, in the commonplaces of the asylum. So at the last, so here you will find at this point of juncture that what does it signify? Not that it was beautiful, her stay in the asylum, she was committed to a mental asylum. Her stay in the asylum was not very beautiful. It was not great. There were very unhappy experiences, but that in the end there was a certain sense of order there. So inside the asylum, even though there were people who were lunatics, the so-called disoriented mob, the so-called crazy people, they all gathered in the asylum, but still there was a sense of order there, something worth learning. So you have something to gain from being in an asylum, where the cracked mirror or my own selfish death outstared me. So the cracked mirror of the asylum wall, I am looking at the cracked mirror which is on the wall, it outstared me, and I am, as a person, I could not stay there and look at it because I was bowed down and I did not continue to look at the mirror. I found out that there is a kind of order in there. I tapped my own head. It was glass, an inverted bowl. It's a small thing to rage inside your own bowl. At first it was private, and then it was more than myself. The act of writing the confessional poetry is indeed an act which takes the mental frenzy out and presents it into the public. It makes it public so everybody can get to learn something from that madness. So these are some poets, some authors that I have discussed in this course. There are many more authors that you can read who have taken recourse to the confessional mode of writing, and in these things you will see that the confessional mode of writing is a very important way of reaching out to people, to women especially, throughout the world. When women read these works, they understand the societal pressure, they understand what kind of person they are dealing with, they understand the shared experiences, and that unifies them again. Thank you for watching this lecture. We see you in next class.
Hello, I am A.K. Sharma and I teach sociology in IIT Kanpur. I am trying to answer a simple question: how sociologists explain their facts. As you know that sociology was developed as a subject dealing with human behavior, but which would use the tools and techniques of science, mathematics, physics, chemistry. But this view that human behavior needs to be studied scientifically has been contradicted later on, and it was said that simply by relating one kind of facts with other kinds of facts, you cannot understand human behavior. To understand human behavior or to actually theorize about human behavior, you have to theorize the theories or motivations or meanings that people have in their mind in involving in a particular action. Now, using these two traditions, one tradition in which we relate one fact of society with other facts scientifically, and another tradition in which we try to develop second order constructs or theories that people have in their mind in acting in day to day life. They have produced two different traditions in sociology. One is called quantitative, another is called qualitative. Quantitative methodology uses scientific methods of conducting surveys, censuses, experiments, and then by using statistical methods, from simple method like arithmetic mean to sophisticated methods like logistic regression, we try to arrive at some inference. Qualitative tradition, qualitative methodology on the other hand uses ethnographic approach, and here the researcher attempts to become part of the community which he or she intends to study, because the assumption is that only by becoming part of the community, by living among the people whom you are studying, and by putting yourself in their shoes, by trying to understand things or their environment or their behavior or their culture or festivals or economic behavior or politics from their angle, from their perspective, how they feel, what understanding they carry in their mind, that only by understanding these things we can understand facts of society. Actually, in one of the latest works, World Bank, which uses a lot of statistics, has also talked about understanding mental models that people use in involving in behavior. Emile Durkheim long back said that sociology uses comparative method, and let me just give one example and then I will finish. Suppose I tell you that infant mortality rate in India is 40. What does it mean? It means nothing. But when you compare infant mortality of India today with Japan, and you find that Japan has 2 and India has 40, then you get disturbed. Then you start thinking, why is it that infant mortality in India is so high? And then you can also compare infant mortality of India with infant mortality of say Kenya or Mozambique or other countries, and you find that these countries have much higher infant mortality than India. And then you can create a hypothesis that perhaps economic development has something to do with infant mortality. Countries which are more developed, countries like Japan, they have low infant mortality. Countries like Mozambique or Kenya, which are less developed, have higher infant mortality. So, you have a connection. This is what sociology is about, connection between facts. So, by using census, surveys, by conducting field work, by using ethnographic methods, by using comparative methods, we arrive at sociological findings. Use of experimental method in sociology has been very less, but I learned that recently economists, which 10 years ago I could not see that economists will one day use experimental method, but today we find that economists are using a lot of experimental methods to study human behavior. Now, this work may be done by economists, but the findings of their study can very well be called sociological studies. So, sociology tomorrow, I think that sociology tomorrow, in addition to using surveys and comparative methods, will also be using experimental methods. Thank you.